This podcast is brought to you by Eyes Wide Shut Athletic Greens. Athletic Eyes Wide Shut Greens is a all-in-one nutrient that is unique to you. It will keep your eyes wide open during the day and wide shut at night. It is the only athletic nutrient that can only be received via special payment on an island. There is nowhere else to get it. And if you tell other people about this supplement, we will find you and we will revoke your right to have it, as well as other things. There will be other dire consequences. If you have any questions about Athletic Eyes Wide Shut Greens, you must seize all inquiries for your own safety. Eyes Wide Shut Greens has a variety of people behind it. Many people have come together to create our unique formula, and those people are on a unique list. Liam?
Which we have right here. Some of these ingredients of these Eyes Wide Shut Greens include former President Donald J. Trump, former President Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, and of course, the man himself, Jeffrey Epstein.
Very exclusive list indeed. Okay, now, that said, Eyes Wide Shut Greens is actually a reference to Eyes Wide Shut, the 1999 film by Stanley Kubrick. It is a film many call a masterpiece, including the man himself. It is a very vain film with a lot of nudity, rated R, but it has a lot of deep psychological and philosophical meaning. There's also some conspiracy theories associated with it, as Stanley Kubrick died of a heart attack shortly after the release of the film. A lot of interesting things about each individual scene. We're going to take it scene by scene. We're going to talk about the different philosophies. We're going to take up...
I want to say one thing first. We all know coroners are naturally very, very lazy people. So if something looks like a heart attack to a coroner, it is a heart attack. So if someone's poisoned with cyanide and their heart stops and it looks like a heart attack, then to a coroner, it is a heart attack. They're lazy. They hate overtime. Continue?
Yeah.
Just want to add that for the audience.
Of course.
Yeah, so we have our opening scene. It takes place in a contemporary house, kind of a big house. You know, you can tell it's a well-off family.
A New York City house.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
So it takes place in New York City, kind of. Not really where it was shot, right? Remind me. I think it was.
It was
London.
shot entirely in London.
Yeah, you can't tell because all cities look the same. So the first thing we see is a shot of our protagonist. I guess you could call it female character undressing. They're getting ready for a party. It's a party scene. Let me just start with this. What do you guys think is the reason why we see the very first shot of this movie is just a naked woman? What do you think?
But he's undressing from behind. She lowers her dress and drops from behind. One of the most dominant positions, positions you can actually have, whether it's sex or a fight, is to actually have it from behind. I know that sounds graphic to people, but think about that. It's like the most dominant place you can actually fucking get into is to really have sex from behind. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
so showing her from behind is almost a very vulnerable place to show her, where it's like you're seeing her, but is she aware that you're seeing her?
So is your perspective as the audience member is to feel domineering, or is it to see that character as being submissive?
To see that character as quite possibly being submissive.
I think I agree, because as you go through the film, she is very provocative. She's very promiscuous,
very alluring.
You know what I'm saying? In more of a submissive way. And you can see that the emotions shown in the film kind of add up to that. So we have our party scene. First, does anybody want to talk about the scene leading up to the party before they actually get there? They're just getting ready. It's pretty basic.
It's a pretty basic scene. We have them in the bathroom getting ready. She's using the toilet while he's in there with her, which, establishes that they're a couple, that they've been together for a while at this point. You know what I mean? It's not like they're at the first date stage where it's like you're trying to maintain a certain air of mystery. Yeah. At this point, you've been married for maybe 10 plus years. You'll piss in front of your spouse.
Yeah, there's a level of trust.
There's a certain level of trust.
Yeah, so this character we're talking about, by the way, we're talking about Alice. And then you have Tom Cruise's character whose name is...
Bill.
Okay. And Bill and Alice are together. Not a lot is explained, but you see that they live together. Or at least it's kind of implied. When we get to the party scene, okay? Now, to generalize this scene... for a quick recap, okay, they go to the Ziegler's party. Ziegler is, the owner or the host of the party, whatever. He presumably owns the property. It's a very large, fancy mansion-looking place, okay? Very big, wide open, tall ceiling, chandelier, fancy you know, with two at least 2 levels. Okay, a big spiral staircase leading upstairs, which you'll see later. Okay, and the general thing that happens in the scene is they walk in together, Alice and what's his name?
Bill Hartman.
Sorry,
yeah.
I don't know why I keep forgetting his name.
Oh, it's fine.
Alice and Bill walk into this party. They're nicely dressed, okay, and immediately they get separated, like right off the bat. And they start flirting with 2 different people. You have an older, what's his name? I don't know if you're a Hungarian guy with an accent.
Yep. I forgot his name, but yeah.
Yeah, she
Pierce Brosnan looking kind of a guy. For the audience that has not seen the film yet, he looks very similar to like a 1990s James Bond.
He really does.
Mm-hmm. And then 2 would later get described as models. You know, I don't know if that's what they are. Probably.
Yeah, for Bill Hartman. Yeah,
You know, for
In
Bill.
a very breathy way, like.
And I would say from the very beginning of the scene, the nature of the flirting, of the exchange between what's her name, Alice, and the Hungarian man is just already distinctly different from the way Bill interacts with the 2 models. Would you guys agree with that?
Exactly. Their conversation at the same time is sexual, while at the same time historical and philosophical. The man points out to her, back in like the 1800s, women would get married for the sole purpose of losing their virginity. It was the only way that they could.
Yeah. So there's certain things in this scene that I think right off the bat are meant to characterize our characters. So Alice, she has a couple of drinks, and she's there. She seems like she doesn't really want to be there. She's kind of stressed out to be there. She makes comments like, why does he think he even invites us to these parties? Whereas Bill is just kind of like, all right, let's go. We got a party. Okay, let's just go to a party, you know? And he seems like more of a people pleaser. Like, he's there. He's always thinking about connections. More of a square, in my opinion. Like, more of a straight-laced guy. Somebody who just kind of wants to get down to business, do the right thing. But you do see him loosen up with those 2 models, even though he is married. And they do establish that they're married in the scene. So I think you're seeing character differences in a very subtle way, but in a way that's really well communicated.
You definitely see that he has lust for those models. You can tell by his eyes, how he's looking at them, that there is lust.
Yes, definitely. I would agree with that. Now, hold on. Let me see this. The Hungarian guy, I have some notes here. So we got certain things that I noticed. The Hungarian guy references the art of love. Okay? He says, you know, in the art of love, such and such says so-and-so. So-and-so says such and such. And we have Alice responding to it in a way. She's been flirty and very, very flirty, very promiscuous in nature, like very,
very sexual in nature.
Yeah, you know, talking with her chin out and in this very
breathy
romantic,
voice,
almost
breathy
mesmerized
voice.
by him.
Yeah.
Whereas not really what you see from Bill. Obviously, men and women flirt differently, but he's not really doing that. He's kind of letting the models come on to him and just kind of allowing it. Where she's coming on to the Hungarian guy and he's coming on to her. There's a little bit more of an intensity there. But you can see something about her character right away, I think, because her character in the beginning, she's sort of very dismissive about concepts of love and romance. He's trying to put the moves on her. The Hungarian guy is trying to put the moves on her in sort of a romantic way, in sort of a suave, kind of smooth kind of way, and she's not there for it. She just wants to get right down to the lusty part. It is the impression that I get when I watch the film, right? So and some evidence of that is when he references Art of Love. And she immediately says, didn't that guy end up alone by himself?
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of just to show you that she isn't really a romantic. You know, she's not looking for that. She wants him to be up for like, yo, I want sex. You know what I mean? That's what she's looking for. That's the kind of... Meanwhile, she is still being faithful. Okay?
Well, I mean... Like, I would think they were both being tested, though. It's just showing the difference between men and women. Like, she knows he's trying to, like, put the moves on her and be like, oh, yes, well, the art of love, you know, like,
yes.
And marriage was just for virgins. And she, like, totally sees through that, and she's, like, somewhat playing along.
Yeah,
but at the same time, she's like, I'm married. In the end, she's like, I'm married. And he's like, well, why? What? Just step away, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing with Bill Hartman. He's dragged away by these 2 models, one of which she mentioned she's a part of the Windsor family, which will be important later, but yeah, and even he's like flirting, and he's definitely swept away by them. And they're like, "You want to go where the rainbow ends?" And he's like, "And where exactly would that be? You know, like where are we going?" And again, he kind of also feels a pull to like after that reconvene, find his wife, and it kind of shows like their first test of fidelity in this movie, which will be a major theme going forward.
And the password, which is in the movie Fidelio.
Yeah. So I like what you said there, Liam. I think that was one thing that I did feel is like they're really trying to make a comment about the difference between men and women in a lot of these.
The perceived difference between men and women.
Difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so another quote from the movie. One of the things about marriage is that it makes deception a necessity for both parties. That was said. Any thoughts?
Well, that depends. Like how do you perceive a good relationship? If you talk to someone like Dan Hardy, he says that really the best way to actually have a marriage is almost like a first date, where it's every time you see that person, you're trying to be your best self. You're trying to be the best version of yourself. You're trying to be the best version of yourself in their mind. So some folks believe that if you cheat on somebody, you should never tell them. That way the image in their mind of you being your best self, they can always maintain that. Mm-hmm. You know, always putting on that front of trying to be your best self. Some people believe that like the actual best option is actually be totally honest and be totally like vulnerable with your mistakes and your flaws.
I think the movie argues against that second point, what you just said. Because as I was going through the analysis of the first half of this movie on the second run through, okay, I'm thinking, okay, so the movie takes you through this whirlwind of a story between Bill and Alice. And then it takes you through this second whirlwind of a story with this crazy orgy sex cult thing going on. This seems like when I first watched the movie, it seems like this is two different storylines, completely separated. That there's really not a lot of connection, but there's like some philosophical connection. I couldn't really put my finger on it. When I had a second run through, I started to realize I think a lot of the dialogue and the relations and the storytelling around these characters is really just a commentary saying this is what human nature is. And so this is why you need a sex cult, you know, which is kind of a crazy thing to say. But hear me out. Ready?
Of course, yeah.
Let's say these conspiracies are true, okay, that the narrative of this film was a direct truth that was Kubrick trying to reveal something that really existed, like the Bohemian Grove type stuff, okay? Like the Jeffrey Epstein type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? If this is why he made the film, then it would make sense that he was involved in that world in some way.
Or at the very least, very aware of it.
Right. And in either case, okay, the film, I think, is aiming to explain why is this a thing? Why is there a sex cult? Why is there this weird thing with elites getting together, doing these very, very, you know, what you would traditionally say, like non-traditional, like maybe even unethical in a pure sense, activities.
That all humans have certain carnal, sexual, erotic desires.
Exactly.
And that even if you repress them, they still need to be fulfilled.
So I think the story between Bill and Alice and showing that even though they know in their hearts or in their minds, they're like, or maybe even as a social contract that the institution of marriage is a good thing and we should just abide by that. That very strict, pure monogamy and not fooling around with other people is a good thing. That this stuff goes against real human nature, and I think that a large part of the philosophy behind this film is trying to say that because we're trying so hard to force these things, or because of maybe some other perverse fact about society, stuff like this big institution of elite sex cult, these things are going to naturally pop up because people can't hold to these ties. Go ahead.
I mean, it makes sense, given I like what you said that way, yeah, because society, in a way, channels all drives. All drives have to be like channeled towards an end in society that society dictates is correct. So the whole idea, I guess, for this cult would be like absolute power. They just do it, and under anonymous face masks, Venetian masks, they will. And like Epstein, it was a way he gathered blackmail with these public figures. Like, it's power. It's like raw power. Like, if you can control people with their sexuality, you could do anything. I mean, money as well. But I think that's a major point of it is just the need to.
There's an old quote, and it said, "How do you control the most powerful men on earth? With sex." Now, go throughout history. How many times have we seen men controlled by that very mechanism? Go back to Charles Manson. How did he get in the same studio as the Beach Boys to use that recording studio? How? Sex. He had women around him. He was able to use their power to leverage them to be able to get in the same studio as the Beach Boys, to leverage that power for sex.
Yeah.
Now, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now, if you guys have read Sex at Dawn by Christopher Ryan, he argues that human beings are not naturally monogamous, meaning you can be monogamous, but almost like how we're naturally omnivores, you can be vegetarian, but it's not the natural inclination for human beings.
Yeah.
We're naturally supposed to desire flesh and to desire meat. Now, in this case, the characters desire a very different kind of flesh. Where you see Bill, when he decides to actually go and to actually participate, when Nick tells him about the certain sex cult that he's been privy to, that you can tell part of him almost doesn't want to go. But part of him, after hearing his own wife's sexual fantasies and desires, is almost compelled to go. Almost as if he's almost on autopilot, to where he doesn't really even have a choice. Which gets back into a different question of, like, do human beings even have free will? You know?
Oh boy, I think they do. I think they definitely do.
Yeah, I think free will is not really the point of this movie, but to speak on that point, there is, like I said, Stanley Kubrick is known for revealing human nature, and just accepting the fact that there is such a thing as human nature is to identify that even though we have choices, we also have choices that we can't avoid making, you know? So what are the choices that we can't avoid making? Well, or rather, we're prisoners to our own desires. And
your own thoughts.
So even if you choose not to act on a desire, human nature dictates that you have the desire. You want the thing, or don't want the thing, or whatever. But moving on to later in the scene, okay, we have. I want to point something out. The guy, there's some. This is clearly a well-crafted story, and this is a good example of a movie that you can analyze in terms of, like, the small details do add up to mean things. Certain little things were put in there, even though on your first run through, there's no chance you're going to notice. But you can. There's a lot of rewatch value in this movie because, for example, there's a suited guy who pulls Bill away from the guy who was playing the piano when they're talking. Okay, he pulls the piano player away. Okay, then Bill goes on to address something upstairs. Okay, you have a prostitute naked, laying out, and
with Ziegler,
who's
on the brink of ODing.
Clearly, and Ziegler has clearly just been performing a sexual act with her because he's buttoning his pants, he's getting his, he has no shirt on, wearing overalls. Okay, so you have that situation. Now the suited guy who pulls Bill away from the piano player, who later turns out to be the guy who reveals the orgy to him. Okay,
that's his name, Nick Nightingale.
Yeah, Nick Nightingale.
Yeah,
it's the same suited guy. Hold on. It's the same suited guy who pulls Tom from the two ladies later in that scene. So I don't know if you guys remember
Tom.
Yeah, Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh okay. All right. Yeah. Yes, in the other party.
So they're really careful about. So that right there is an early indication that there's something organized going on. Do you know what I mean? Like having one guy going around the party, making sure the right people are talking to the right people.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Why would you have that guy? Why would you have a random guy just going up to people talking at a party and being like, oh, can you come over here with me for a second?
Yeah.
You know? They never really explained why he pulled them away. I think it was just, we can't have these two guys talking together. Or, at that point, he pulled them away to bring them upstairs, but...
Yeah. I get what you mean, though. It's like, the whole first Ziegler party mirrors the later occult party. And it's like the same people in the same roles, and just generally, what's it called? Like, it's a networking event. I mean, it's weird to say that.
A lot about money and connections.
Yeah, and I saw other people who were critiquing the movie saying that the scene is meant to mirror the orgy scene. And if you look at in terms of like the framing of the shots and how it was filmed, it's very similar in terms of like you have this big wide open area. It's a different building, but they're both mansions. So the orgy takes place in this big mansion with all these people. The party scene takes place in this big mansion with all these people. And so there's a juxtaposition as far as, it's almost like the same scene, except in one scene they're trying to be polite. And in the other scene they're just giving into their fantasies, It's almost like saying, okay, all these people in this party room would be doing the same things the people at orgy were doing if it weren't for the fact that they were actually there, not invited to be that way. But that's in their hearts. This is what would be happening at a real party. You know what I mean?
That ties into a far greater question to where are men faithful, or are they only faithful as far as their opportunities? Meaning, how many guys would cheat, like Tiger Woods cheated with 100 Swedish models, if they had the opportunity? So guys will be as faithful as their opportunities allow them to be. Like, how true is that? We see with Bill where he's faithful until he has an opportunity to not be faithful. Then how faithful really are you? What do you think?
At the same time, though, he only does that. He only does his like whole midnight journey through this movie of trying to, be whatever, cheat on his wife, Nicole Kidman, Alice, because she shared her sexual fantasy of this Navy deckman that she could have just had sex with for one night and like forsaked everything about them being married or anything like that. But she decided against it. But she still had the fantasy. She still fantasized about throwing away her entire marriage, her daughter, everything she worked so hard for, just over one sexual desire. Now, did she give in to that proclivity? No. But did she feel it? She did feel it. And she admitted to feeling it. She told her own husband that.
Right.
Which makes you wonder, it's like, if she didn't tell him that, would he have felt the need to go on this escapade? You have to wonder, like, how insecure did that make him?
I feel like it made him very insecure, and I feel like if he wasn't told that, he probably wouldn't have gone on the whole escapade.
That's fascinating. So do we even choose our own thoughts?
Do you think it was appropriate for her to admit that to him?
Is it
do you
appropriate?
think it was better for everybody or worse for everybody for her to have said that?
That's a really hard question to ask. Because if it was your wife, would you want to know that she had like a sexual fantasy about someone else?
Personally, I think I would.
I mean, you kind of have to expect that. Because it's like, we're all human beings. It's like, I think every human being, when they see someone attractive, they almost always have some kind of fantasy about that person. Especially if they're a very sexual person. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, two things I want to point out before we move on to talk about the next scene, okay? Number one, when Alice is leaving that Hungarian guy after they've been flirting for a while, he wants to have sex upstairs, and she's like, you know what? We got to cut this. I can't do this. I'm married. Okay. But there's a little bit of an exchange that happens where he says, oh, your husband will be fine if we take a little bit longer. And she's sort of like, I'm not worried about my husband. I'm worried about, what about me? Will I be okay if I keep going? Which just kind of shows that she knows that Bill is, for the most part, faithful. Or at least, she can't see any reason not to think so. She does trust him to some extent. She doesn't trust herself, which, when you look at that in the context of the upcoming scenes, shows that she feels guilty about her own proclivities or whatever. Now, in a separate note, I think one of the reasons we see this early scene with more nudity with Bill upstairs with the prostitute, not only to give hints about Ziegler and his things and what's going on, to give you something to think about there when we see stuff happening in the mansion later with the orgy, but I think that one of the things in that scene that shows us is that when they're together, when they're getting high in the bedroom, and she starts accusing him of all these natural desires or whatever, he says a lot of things. He says things like, I happen to be a doctor, okay? And when I'm working with a patient, the last thing I'm thinking about is sex. You get to see that outright when he's working with that prostitute. He's really clearly not interested in anything. He's not thinking about sex or whatever.
Yeah.
He's there. He's looking, perfect eye contact, does not examine her body like that at all throughout that whole scene. So I think we already get a look into his professionalism right off the get-go, so that we know that that's true about his character when we're watching that scene. Like, we know that when Bill is trying to help a person out, it doesn't matter if they're completely naked. It doesn't matter if they're a naked prostitute in a private room. He's not there to examine their body or anything, right? He actually wants to do doctor stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If somebody's ODing upstairs, he's going to look in their eyes. He's going to ask them questions, medical questions, try to figure out what's wrong. He's going to try to bring them to health. And then he's interested in keeping them healthy. Like, even when he leaves, Ziegler was like, can I get rid of this girl? And he's like, no, I would keep her for another hour and find somebody to get her home. Which we see again in a later scene, even though I think the context and meaning is slightly different there, when that girl kisses him after her dad dies. In
Yes.
that scene.
Yeah, that woman.
Same situation, right? He's maybe a little bit more suggestible there, but he does not seem interested. You know, we have the one scene where he's with the prostitute, actually with her in the hotel, where he gets hooked by the hooker, and he's thinking about his wife, and he's going through all this stress after she tells him that stuff. In that scene, he winds up paying her the $150, doesn't even do anything with her, right?
Yeah.
And clearly, that just shows a part of his character is that even though he does have these desires, that is kind of a theme of the movie, he is one of the last people out of all the characters to really even give in to those kinds of temptations.
But he still came very close.
He came very close. There was a kiss.
To a razor's edge.
Yeah.
I'd argue a kiss is almost cheating. At the very least, could be cheating.
I would call it cheating.
If it's on the lips, you cheated.
I would
In my mind, if you wouldn't do what you did in front of your spouse or your wife, you cheated. It could even be emotional cheating, but if you wouldn't do it in front of them, you just shouldn't fucking do it.
Yeah.
I think we all agree on that, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I would say.
Moving on to the post-party scene, okay, after they, do everything, you have these characterizations of Alice and Bill and what they're about and what they're like, these philosophies on human nature, and introducing to the Ziegler family, and maybe even an allusion to the later scene of the orgy with the space of the big mansion. We move on to this post-party scene, which might be one of the most important scenes in the whole movie.
Pillow talk.
We follow up with another shot of Alice naked going right away, okay? Which, now I'm gonna say something before I say that. I'm going to say what the scene is, okay? The scene goes into them in the bedroom. They're talking about how the party went, whatever. They start getting high. They're clearly going into a mode of wanting to relax and end the night. However, before that happens, we have an insane exchange of dialogue where Alice basically admits to cheating without literally admitting to cheating. In her mind, she cheated. She I don't know if you guys would agree with the way I said that, but basically...
Some people would, some people wouldn't, though.
Yeah, basically, you have a dialogue where she starts a line of questioning against Bill, saying, Bill, have you ever thought about... Did you have sex with those models? Why were you talking to those models? Is it because you didn't want to have sex with those models? Oh, so you did want to have sex, you just didn't do it because we were married. So what does that mean, Bill? And it's almost like,
Oh, she was projecting. Yeah.
She was projecting heavily, right?
Yes.
And then we climax that scene with her telling the story, and then the tone of things gets a little bit more dramatic. She tells the story kind of slowly in a dramatic sense. It really gives you anxiety as the viewer. She tells Bill that they were on this vacation or retreat or whatever. She saw this guy at another table who was a soldier, and she started fantasizing about him. And ultimately, she said that she would have given up their daughter, their marriage, everything, just for one night with this guy. Like
just for
Steven
a one-night
said,
stand.
Yeah.
which is an insane thing to hear. I mean, especially as a happily married man, you hear that, you think, this isn't what I thought my wife was like. Why is she saying this stuff? Why would she be attracted to somebody to that extent? Is she really faithful? So these are the kinds of questions that start to stir in Bill's mind. It's very unsettling, and that leads him down a lot of the decisions I think that he makes later in the movie. But I will say this. We do have the orgy scene, and after the orgy scene, it seems like more and more, you think this scene is designed to make you think, oh, these characters are... This is a weird thing to happen. What is this? Who are all these people? Why is it happening? This is the tone going into the scene. You're not expecting it. The movie doesn't really prepare you for this to be the scene that you're watching. Okay? And then after the scene, the opposite happens. You start to feel like everybody's in on it. Wait, why is this person not saying anything? Wait, how does that person know that information? What's going on? And as the movie, you feel like, who was at that party? Was everybody there? So I wonder, now this is kind of an extreme take, but I wonder if all of these nude shots of Alice are meant to familiarize you with her body so that when we get to that scene, we can look for her body. What do you think?
Very, very plausible.
Yeah.
Because she did have like an actual dream of being there, which makes you wonder, was it a dream or was it real? Here's a question I want to have for you guys and like the audience. Comment. Tell me exactly what you think about this. If you're dreaming, or even like you're in like a certain VR, like virtual reality, that's indistinguishable from reality, and you're married, whether it's a dream or VR, and you have an opportunity to cheat, and it feels real, you think it's real, and you cheat, then you wake up and you realize you didn't actually cheat. Is that cheating? Even though in your mind you thought it was real, you couldn't tell the difference. If you cheat in a dream, is it still cheating? Even if you thought it was real. What do you guys think?
How lucid is a dream? That's the question.
Completely lucid.
I don't think that matters. Does it really matter how lucid the dream is?
Well, if it's a lucid dream, you have more control over what you're dreaming about.
You're basically you in a lucid dream.
All right, that's
like you are just right there.
But I mean, you have the choice in the dream to cheat or to not cheat, and you choose to cheat, even though it's not real. But you thought it was real. Is it cheating?
I don't think it's cheating, but I don't think it's not. I don't think it's insignificant just because it's not cheating. I think it's still a significant thing. You know, like as a relationship, I think you need to talk about that dream. You know,
they did.
Yeah, and they did, and they left it a dream.
Because she has that fantasy where she says, like, she was at a party surrounded by guys and she was getting fucked by multiple guys, and she starts crying, and it's like, was that a dream or was that real?
I think it really happened. That's what I think.
You definitely could make that argument.
I think it happened, and you know, I think.
How come the mask was right on her bed?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, for real.
I think there's some clear indications that she knows things that she's not saying.
That many people know things. How come that one girl at the costume shop said, "Get a cloak lined with ermine"? It's almost as if she knew exactly where she was going, as if she had been there before. Wouldn't you guys agree?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
She could have been there that night.
So why do you think Alice clearly twists up the conversation? Because in my perspective, watching the scene where they're talking high in the bedroom, she's intentionally stirring something. She's doing that on purpose. Do you think it was her plan to confess these things, thoughts, and feelings to Bill in that moment?
I think her plan was she had to project what she was feeling, and in that projection, she wanted to have her preconceived notions confirmed. Meaning she's projecting, she's having fantasies. So in her mind, her husband has to have fantasies too. They're both human.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you all agree?
That way she feels less guilty about the
Yeah.
fantasies.
And Bill does not handle it correctly, although it is anxiety induced because it's like
Well, not only are they smoking pot, but he's not prepared for.
He is not.
This is at the end of the day after a long party. You know, they had a hard day. They hit on models. You know, they had a lot of things happen that day.
I mean, that scene gave me anxiety.
It is very
dude.
anxiety-inducing.
It's like every guy has had that moment with their girlfriend where it's like their girlfriend is pressing them hard, and you're like, man, I gotta find the escape route right now. Give me a way out. Give me a way out right now. What's the right answer?
It's like one of those choose your own adventure games where you have option A, B, C, and D of what to say. If you pick the wrong one, you get the wrong ending. You know what I mean?
You do, yeah.
You have to pick the exact. You got 25% chance every time, and the more questions come by, the more you're like, oh no, man, I don't know if I can keep picking the right options.
No, quick
But
time
you
event.
know your girl's not gonna let you off the hook easy if you give the wrong answer. If you give the wrong answer,
Nah,
man, she's gonna hold that against you for the next 5 years. And by the next 5 years, I mean 50. And by 50, I mean divorce.
All right. So part of this conversation, just to give you some very tangible example of how Alice is twisting up the conversation. At one point, Tom says, "Oh, it's understandable that guy would want to have sex with you. You are beautiful." And he's trying to be sexy, right? He's putting moves on her. He starts kissing her neck when he says this. He's like, "Oh, you're beautiful." And she's not thinking about, she's not in the mood, I guess. So she says, "Oh, so you're saying the only reason he would want to talk to her or why any man would ever want to talk to me is because they want sex with me?" That's just so clearly not what he said.
Yeah,
that it almost makes me mad to even hear her say that, even though this is a fictional scenario. It's really not a fictional scenario. Like, I feel like these conversations really do happen this way, which is why I think she was clearly trying to. Was that projecting? I mean, is that projecting when she says that? Because to me, that's an intentional twisting of someone's words.
Well, this whole movie's a mirror. I mean, there's a mirror on the cover. It's very much like, what do we believe is our own definition of fidelity and just love itself.
I also love one more layer to the film, how it takes place during Christmas time. The most breakups actually happen on Christmas Day.
Yeah. I did not know that.
You know that?
Where's that statistic from? Do you know?
I forget where it's from, but the reason is the holidays and Christmas time are often a time of deep self-reflection. Oftentimes, not intentionally, but it's by the environment. Because think about that. Christmas Day, you're going to be around your family. So any kind of like emotional issues or family drama gets exacerbated by the holidays. Gift giving, the gifts you didn't receive, all the family drama. If you don't like your in-laws, having to see them. Hence why, if you're not having a good time in your relationship, most breakups tend to happen on Christmas Day. out of any other day in the year. You think it wouldn't be Christmas Day. You think, oh, it's probably New Year's, maybe it's March. But no, it's actually Christmas Day.
I heard it was like a week before Christmas Day.
Either way, it's during the holiday season.
Just
I think
because,
it's
you don't want
those
to be
whole
around
2 weeks, Christmas, New Year's, like that
Yeah.
whole span
the end
of
of
time.
the
A time of very deep self-reflection.
Right. So moving on towards the later half of this conversation between Bill and Alice, there is an interesting comment that is kind of distinct from the rest of the theme of the conversation, where they do talk about human nature, specifically feminine female nature, and they're maybe making a comment about the misconception that men are the horny, can't control themselves type, and women are the more loyal. Oh, I just need to be there for a kid. I need to pick a good suitor, have a family sort of mindset. Okay, Alice yells, "Oh, million years of evolution. Women are the loyal ones." And then Bill basically says, "Yeah, I don't think you're gonna cheat on me because you're a woman." Okay, that's like the type of thing a man would do.
worst thing.
He said women don't have those kinds of fantasies.
Exactly. Meanwhile,
Then she feels like
she makes a comment. She says, "Man, if you men only knew." So I think that's also another theme in the movie that the movie is trying to subtly say here. This is kind of off the main theme, but it's trying to say like men and women are kind of the same in ways that we don't treat each other like we're the same, but we really are the same in a lot of core ways.
But societally, we're conditioned to believe that we're not the same in those areas.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just terrible.
And then she laughs hysterically, and we get to the end of the scene.
And then I think she's not really telling the full truth when because he accuses that, oh, you'd never do that because you're a woman. Most sexist thing to say. Hey, it's 1999. And
Different era.
And she's like, if you only knew, you meant, you know. And I think she's lacing into him a lot. I don't think she would have maybe left him. She exaggerates it a bit. She smirks. She's like, I would have left you, Helena, their daughter. I don't know if it would have went that far. She definitely had the fantasy, but because he's even trying to say in the beginning of that scene, like, oh, well, yeah, of course they're hot models, you know, but, like, I would never, you know? And she's like, how do you know? You know, like, she's projecting onto him the negative masculinity, and he's projecting on her that she would never leave him.
And that ties in perfectly to our next scene. Where how does the scene end? A phone call. The phone call is from one of his patients who just passed away.
Right.
His daughter is at the house, and he needs to go there to make sure that the actual body is dead, is medically dead. And then what happens when he goes there? The woman that he's there to actually help comfort, to actually see her dead father, comes on to him, revealing that she's been having sexual fantasies about him for quite possibly years, when they've never had a conversation outside of her father, ever.
Yeah.
And yet she still has those fantasies. Right when Bill told his wife, no, women don't have those kinds of fantasies. That's a man thing.
Yeah.
Then to have his whole belief system shattered right in front of his face by not only hearing, you know what, your wife has sexual fantasies about different men. This woman who's married, whose father just died, would leave her whole marriage and family behind for a guy she's only had maybe a conversation with once a month for a couple years.
Yep.
What does that tell you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you hit that spot on. It seems like the whole purpose of that scene is to show it's not just her. You know, it's not just
her.
Alice. You're talking about multiple situations like this. You know what I mean? This woman too.
Where are human beings naturally monogamous?
Exactly.
That's the real question. Some animals are.
I do think that they take the opportunity in this scene too to show you again with Bill's character. He's a little bit, even though he has his temptations like everybody else, he is very unique. Okay, in this scene, not only does he totally, outright reject. He stays focused, goes back into his doctor mode, gives her eye contact, says, "I think you're not thinking right," but when she starts talking about things like, "Oh, I'm getting married. Oh, we're gonna go away together," he has an attitude. He doesn't have an attitude of, "Oh, that's great, whatever." He's genuinely excited for her. He's like, "Oh, that's great. Oh, I'm so happy to hear that." Yep. He still has a very firm belief in his mind about the institutions of monogamy and marriage, right? So I almost wonder if having this stuff happen first and then having go to the orgy is meant to, like, this film is a narrative about what is it going to take to break this guy?
Yeah.
What's it going to take to get him to stop believing in these things?
That ties in my question
It's all
before.
about, like, testing him.
Are men just as faithful as their opportunities? Where, yes, they'll be faithful only as far as their opportunities. Where it's like, how many guys would cheat on their wife like Tiger Woods did if they had the opportunity? That's a serious question. Most regular guys don't have that opportunity. They don't have a golf tour that they win and then have 100 Swedish models in a tour bus waiting for them. It's like many guys will scoff at that guy and say, I would never cheat. But have they ever resisted that kind of temptation? Have they even been offered that kind of temptation?
Right. For example, if you were offered the temptation to snack, scan, and win a Mr. Beast Feastables bar, you buy it, and then you could maybe win money. Would you take it? All right? That's a question about humanity.
Would you take it?
Would you take that opportunity?
Well, here's the thing. When did Tiger Woods become really famous? Wasn't he a child prodigy of a golf player?
Yeah,
like
was.
I think it was socialized into him. Like I've noticed this with Donald Trump too. He has such a weird relationship with women, and from what I've read, his own mother would like pay for women to be with him. Like I think if you're that much of a celebrity at such a young age, perhaps you just see it as an exchange, you know? Like, perhaps it's just a method of power exchange and value.
That much pressure from that early on, you have someone like Tiger Woods, he's a child prodigy, so his dad expects great things from him. Apparently, his dad would actually verbally abuse him while he was practicing golf. Apparently, he would call him the N-word. In fact, they even had to have a safe word, to where if things got too much, Tiger could actually say, hey, like, please stop. Now, apparently the actual safe word was never actually used, but like, could you imagine that, guys? Your dad is literally going to call you the N-word while you're practicing golf just to harden your mind mentally to make you a better golfer? That's pretty fucking extreme, man. Come on.
Horrible, man.
That's horrible.
But perhaps that's what it is. There's no such thing as true love when you're that much... There's that... There can be, but like I think middle-class people... It's more of a thing where you love to love. You don't. There's no. You'll see later with the whole occult party. It's more about making business connections. As weird as that
like
sounds, because it's
money
orgies,
and, like, power
but
kind of like tied into all
tied
this.
together. And there is no. You know, they'd probably laugh at the fact of like, oh, there being a true star love. You know, like star, romantic fantasy about it. You know, like that there would be any romance anymore. They'd probably laugh at that. The people in the party, like it's more just for like, again, base nature, physical desires. At that point, maybe.
So, at the end of our scene where this woman kisses Bill, and Bill's still thinking about what his wife said, and this guy died, and then the woman who kisses Bill's husband walks in, and Bill has to pretend like nothing just happened.
Yeah, that was a funny.
You gotta feel for Bill at this point a little bit. You know what I mean? Because he's a doctor.
He didn't ask for that.
He didn't ask for any of this. So now he's got, frankly, let's call it what it is, way too fucking much on his mind. He's just got too much on his mind now. So he decides to go for a walk. He tells his wife, he's not going to be there for a while. This is the scene where he walks the streets and eventually ends up being hooked up by the hooker. Doesn't actually do anything except for the one kiss, but gets right on the razor's edge. Okay, so we transition into the scene. Before we go on to where he goes to the jazz lounge and meets the piano player again, Nick Nightingale.
Yeah.
Before he gets there, we do have a brief moment where he bumps into this bunch of guys on the street, a really rude, rowdy bunch of young men. They call him gay slurs and all this stuff, and they're just assholes.
While at the same time calling him gay slurs, while at the same time offering to do gay sex with him. Which is very fascinating. Think about that. Someone is going to call you a gay slur while at the same time offer their friend's asshole to you.
Outstanding defense mechanism.
Oh, yes. Very impressive defense mechanisms.
I would consider that a very impressive
Now,
defense
going
mechanism.
into the next scene, I have a question for you guys. Do you guys believe in unconditional romantic love?
Well, before we get into that, could I just say with this whole group gang of like frat boys, like it's interesting. I think that's a comment on masculinity because you immediately have them like, what's the worst thing they could call this random guy walking the street, and they just are like, you are
The F word.
Yeah, you know what?
Like you were gay, you were not even a man. Like, and then it is weird they offer one of their buddies to them, but it's just like the fact that men need to have like relationships and a woman to almost prove them. Like if he was walking with a woman, if he was there with Alice, his wife, Nicole Kidman, it wouldn't have probably happened.
But how much of that is a construct that we have in our society? Think about this.
100%.
If he were alive in ancient Sparta, to be a man in Sparta, you had to be gay. Like there was no other option. To be a man in Sparta, you had to be a gay man. In fact, the highest form of,
right? I don't know.
Well, the highest form of love in Spartan society was between two men.
Wait, really? Oh,
yes.
shit.
Yeah.
Damn.
Most of the time, if like you were a Spartan warrior, you would live in the barracks, which only men could live in the barracks. And you wouldn't even be allowed to take a wife until you completed some of like your military service. So until then, you were only going to be having sex with men. In fact, the way they would do it is one of your mentors would actually be...
Mentors.
Yeah, one of your mentors
Your mentor.
would actually be a man who would raise you up, and he would essentially be like a sexual guide for you.
A lot of
like a
parallels
rumor.
between the Spartans and the Navy. Moving back to
yes.
your comment on the scene,
Like
I think
full fleet.
something interesting that this is another take is I think there is some contemporary elements to that scene where he bumps into the group of guys like that, because I don't think if this movie was made today, I don't think you would see that exactly the way it went down.
That scene would probably get cut.
Not at all.
You know, that's what I'm saying. So back at the time, I don't even think, since it was like much more normal. You know, the homophobic elements to that scene, I think, was much more normal in 1999. It wasn't so culturally like, it's not the same culture as we have today, obviously. So I don't think that had an emphasis on that scene. You know what I mean? So the scene was not really about sexuality as much as it was about the type of interaction that was. You have a group of guys, like, there is like a sort of an alpha beta necessity. Like, you got this group of guys together, they feel the need to be,
He essentially ran into 5 Andrew Tates.
Exactly. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Homophobia mixed with violence. It makes for a very rousing combination. But back to my question. Mm-hmm. Jumping into the next scene, before we get there, is unconditional romantic love possible between two partners? I'm going to venture to say no. Now, you can love somebody, but can a man and woman love each other unconditionally romantically? I think a parent can love a child unconditionally. And I'll give one example. I was watching a TED Talk with the mother of Dylan Crable, the man, or rather boy, who did the shooting at Columbine. And you know what she said? She said, even though my son shot up a school full of innocent children, I still love my son. Now that's unconditional love, where you don't place a single condition upon that love. Is that love, unconditional love, possible between two romantic partners? I want to hear your guys' opinion. If you guys comment, tell us what you think. What do you guys think?
I would say you could get close. Like you said, you're going to have it for your kid. So I think in a way of keeping partnership together for your children, you could get close to unconditional, but no, not
fully
probably not
unconditional.
actually unconditional. Yeah.
This begs another question, I think, which is, to what extent do we change? Because we change as people
Every day.
If I could be as in love as possible with a woman, but I'm in love with that woman. That woman can change as a woman. They could something could happen in their life. I could change as a man. So if a change happens, if change is possible in that person to a certain extent, then you can never really guarantee that there won't be a change that will cause me to stop feeling that way, because you'll be a different person. It's not even that I stopped loving that woman. It's that woman is no longer that woman anymore. It doesn't exist. You've changed into a different person now.
Like, there's an old Chinese proverb that says, a man can never step in the same river twice, for he is a new man and it is a different river. Think about that. The water flowing is different. The man, he's changed. He's not the same man.
However, as Stanley Kubrick likes to remind us, there are also some things that don't really seem like they ever change in human nature and in individuals. So, can your love for another person be all-encompassing and all of it be based on aspects that don't typically change at all in a person?
Want to know what it is? There's also one old Chinese proverb where it says to love someone is to live through the death of several people. Which basically means is, to truly love someone, you have to accept that the different archetypes and characters that they embody will eventually die off. That to actually love someone for 10, 20 years, you have to accept that different versions of them will live and die. Not that they'll literally die, but that different aspects of their character will die. Mm-hmm. And that in the future, they'll be a new person. Well, where you can't expect the guy you married when you were 20 to be the same man that he's going to be when he's 40. So you have to be able to live through the death of who he was when he was 20, and then accept him to be reborn as a new person.
Would you guys think, and comments of course below, like that a lot of that, we almost kind of are stuck in that now, where it's like people don't stick around maybe. I mean, like
We have more options.
where we have more options, I guess. But I think people don't give each other a shot, really. Like,
not in the same way, because they have more options. You go back to, say, 1950, back when my grandparents were dating. If you met a girl and you were with her for, say, 3 months, and you guys had like an argument, you might be more inclined to work out that argument, because you can't just go on Tinder and swipe right and find 100 new people the next day.
yeah,
So you'd be more inclined to say, you know what, we're in a small town. Maybe you've only dated 3 or 4 girls in like your entire life, and you're going to be like, you know what, it's not worth just walking away from somebody. When will I meet somebody new? Everyone you know is getting married. You guys are conditioned to work through this. Like, my grandparents didn't believe in divorce. They didn't believe in that concept. They thought, if you guys have a problem, you guys have to do whatever it takes to work it out. If that means you guys have to sit up and argue all night, that's what you have to do. If you have to go to couples therapy, that's what you have to do. So when I was a kid, my parents didn't get divorced because of that influence. Mm-hmm. My grandparents simply would not accept them getting divorced. When honestly, it would have been a far healthier situation to have my parents get divorced and do co-parenting from separate houses than be in one toxic household. But when you have a certain belief system that won't allow for divorce, you end up having sometimes a far more toxic environment than you really had to have.
For example, things like the legitimacy of prostitution and sex work, right?
People call it the oldest profession. People call it the oldest profession.
yeah.
If you think about it, the commentary that the movie has on this is almost like it's trying to say, like in The Purge, like, oh, if we have one day a year,
Yes.
well, you could just have the purge. You know, nobody will murder for the rest of the year because it's legal this one day. It's almost like saying the same thing about prostitution and sex work. It's like, oh, if we just have one big orgy like every month, well, we don't have to worry about cheating on our partner because we'll just have that one thing.
Just that one day.
It's kind of like the same concept, where it's just like you might have to make temporary exceptions to long-held traditions just to save the long-held traditions themselves. Now, do I believe that? I think it's hard to say. But some interesting points, you know? Now, we have the scene with the jazz lounge. He talks to the piano player. The piano player tells him, Nick Nightingale tells him about this party in a very... He doesn't really tell him anything about the party, but he makes it interesting enough by admitting that he plays there blindfolded, and you need a password to get in, and there's naked women, and big emphasis on the statue.
Let's talk about the password. The password is Fidelio.
Yeah.
Which, what does Fidelio mean?
Fidelity.
Yeah,
Fidelity means
yeah.
being fidelity. But it's also the name of one of Beethoven's most famous works of art, Fidelio.
Yeah. It's also interesting that it's coming from Nick Nightingale, who's named after the bird, the nightingale, and they say that its call or its song is based off of that call of the nightingale.
Yeah.
So all the symbolism really ties in right there.
You gotta love the amount of symbolism Kubrick puts in his films, man. You gotta love that.
Very American. Like, for example, we notice that every time they walk into a room and there's a TV on, many times there's football on the TV. Now, what is that? That's bread and circus for the audience. Many people know everything about their favorite football team, but they know nothing about how the U.S. government actually works. They don't even know what a congressman is versus what a senator is. They don't even know how we have 3 branches of government in this country. But if you ask them any football trivia question, man, they're your fucking man. They know everything about that. They got their beer league football team. They have their fantasy football. And that's where a lot of people live their lives. They live their lives watching other men accomplish things.
But the next scene that we're talking about is looking for a costume.
Looking for a costume. Where does he go? He goes to a costume shop after Nick Nightingale says, you know what, man, I tell you about this party, but you can't find a costume at this hour of night. And what does he do? He leverages again the fact that he's a doctor to show up to a costume shop to get his way in. Now, how many times in this movie does he leverage the fact that I'm a doctor to manipulate people?
At least
To
a
get
handful
people
of times.
to get people to do things they wouldn't otherwise do for a regular person. Where a lot of people, when they read the book Frankenstein, a lot of people say, how believable is the character of Dr. Frankenstein? That you would have a medically trained doctor performing these ridiculous experiments. A lot of people say it's not really believable.
I think having him be a doctor and do that so much in the film kind of helps emphasize the fact that the people who are at this eyes wide shut party are truly elites.
Yep.
You know, that there's a level above, I'm a doctor.
There's a level above.
That
I'm
he
a doctor.
can't even touch.
Yeah.
He can't even touch. We see Bill maintain his composure, deal with his problems with his wife. You know, he's clearly a very competent doctor. He's not just a doctor. He's one of the most well-known, well-networked doctor that everybody calls him specifically for help.
In New York City, of all places.
So he's not just any doctor. He's a doctor that's like highly successful among other
Esteemed
doctors.
doctor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he can't even touch upon the personalities in that room. He's nothing. They want to strip him naked.
He's a fly on the wall.
Exactly. So I think that might be part of the reason why they also use that. But it also does affect his character. The way the movie portrays him going around being like, I'm a doctor, it is very obvious. It's very out there, like, oh, look at what he's doing. But it doesn't. The movie doesn't necessarily give you its own opinion about him doing that. I feel like you're kind of left as a viewer to decide for yourself, like, how do I feel about him going around telling people he's a doctor, to lie to them, to talk to this person that doesn't want to see them, and you know what I mean? I don't think what do you think? Do you disagree? I don't think the film has like an opinion on that.
Yeah, I think Kubrick doesn't really try to judge his characters. He allows the audience to judge the character, as opposed to having him judge the character. Where it's just like you have a film, like a modern day film, like Prometheus, where it's like every time they're being smart, they have to tell you how smart they're being. Mm-hmm. Here, it's a lot more subtle. It's a lot more laid back, where it's like, no, you can decide how smart this character is. We're not going to fucking shoehorn in and just constantly tell you how smart we are. A lot of modern films just want to do that. They want to constantly tell you just how smart they are when they're being smart. So it's like you have a scene like that where you have someone like him leveraging his doctorate to be able to control people, you know, and that kind of ties in back to like the Holocaust, where like a lot of people want you to forget about all the horrible things that doctors did during the Holocaust. I mean, people like Joseph Mengele, where it's like you have these horrific, terrible experiments, almost something out of like Gothic horror happening, where people want you to forget all the times doctors in history have abused their powers over patients, where they had great knowledge, but it's like Dr. Frankenstein, they had knowledge without wisdom. Without that wisdom, they abused their power.
Oh, that's deep. Thinking about that, knowledge without wisdom, right? Like it takes a level of wisdom not to go around telling people I'm a doctor just to get what you want. That's like wisdom.
It's like a 10-year-old boy who found his father's shotgun. That's what that's like. Where yes, he may have the knowledge to use it, but he lacks the wisdom and he has no prudence.
Yeah.
Without temerity to actually make wise decisions, having that knowledge will actually hurt you and the people around you. It won't actually benefit you. Where I think people can sometimes forget that knowledge has a power all by itself. Knowledge on its own has power. Now let's go into our next scene here. We got past there. Now we're at the costume shop. He arrives and he finds out that a new man is running it. Someone that he doesn't know, but a man that has a Russian accent.
Yeah.
And what does he do? The first thing he says is, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He basically bribes this guy to get him a brand new costume. Or he says he'll pay double what it's worth. They go downstairs, and as he's getting the new costume, this man finds his daughter presumably having sex with two Asian men.
Yeah.
He's not too happy about it either.
Cross-dressing.
Who were cross-dressing, who presumably looked to be in their mid-40s with a teenage girl. So what does he do? He freaks the fuck out. He starts going crazy, man. I mean,
he locks them in the room.
He locks them in the room and starts telling his daughter he's going to kill you, you fucking whore. And I mean, would I use that language? Probably not. But would I kill her? I'll think about it.
And it's all kind of pretty over the top. Like
it's all over the top.
A lot of aspects of this scene, I think, were definitely used specifically so that you could reference the scene later when he sees the same guy from the costume shop dropping off the costume. You see there's a huge difference.
Oh, yeah.
Huge difference in
his tone and demeanor. Everything
as far as like the interaction and how that goes. Even offering his daughter, maybe underage daughter up to Bill's character, yeah.
Well, at the same time, the offering was almost a threat while giving an offer.
That's what I'm saying.
It was a very veiled threat.
Because he knew he went to the party. Everyone at the party knows he went there, and
every character in the movie knows that he went to the party,
even
though
much.
there's no reason.
Yeah,
it's like it really is, and that's part of the Eyes Wide Shut theme. You know what I mean? It's like you don't know who knows. You know, so it's sort of like that's almost a commentary on ethics in general. It's like, why are we ethical? Why do we try to be ethical? Because we don't know who knows. You know what I mean? You could do something that you thought nobody saw, but then there might even be things in your demeanor or your behavior outside of that event where people can kind of pick on, you know, like things that you've done and experiences you've had that maybe you shouldn't have or stuff like that. You know what I mean?
It's almost like meeting someone that's killed someone before, and you don't necessarily know to a certainty that they killed somebody, but you can just tell by their demeanor.
Yeah.
No, this person is willing to kill people. You can just tell. Even if they're trying to hide it, even if like they're around you.
You can almost smell it, you know?
I think it actually might be possible. You might be able to smell like pheromones off people.
Technically, yeah.
Yeah. Where pheromones, you can't actually smell them consciously, but subconsciously your body actually smells them.
Have you met anybody that has like killed someone?
I mean, I think both my grandparents have fucking killed people. I mean,
yeah, but
warriors.
It didn't seem like
people of war.
Yeah.
Well, in that context, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a very weird mindfuck where you think about your
Their
grandparents.
family, though. Yeah, they're
and
like going to give you that like terror response.
Oh, of course
You seem
not.
like you were talking about someone else. I'm just.
There's been a few people I've met in my life that I could definitely have a demeanor about them where I could say, "You're capable of killing somebody, aren't you?"
Yes.
I've met a few.
Yeah,
You've met a few. I've met a few. We've all seen a few.
Yeah.
We all know the people. You know what I mean?
Where it's like, how many sociopaths, if you're walking down New York City, how many sociopaths do you walk by when you're walking down Times Square? You walk past 120 people. How many of them have actually murdered somebody?
It's probably not zero.
It might not be zero.
It's probably not zero.
It might not. It might not be 120, but it might be one out of 120.
5% out of 120.
Yes.
Yeah.
It'll be like 5% of them.
Well, it depends on what city you're into, I guess. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, New Yorkers are so rude. Almost anyone could be a sociopath. It feels like, but
But it's easy to tell, real.
it's easy to tell. And now we're going into the next scene, where he leaves the costume shop and goes to the party. Takes a taxi there. And what does he do? He leaves the taxi cab with his stuff in there and takes a few hundreds and rips them in half. That way he'll have half with the serial number. He says, "Listen, take these hundreds. I'll keep the other half. Keep the car running. I'll be back in maybe an hour or so." Just to give himself a way out.
The fact that he took a taxi is a good sign that he just really didn't know what he was getting into.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And he was going out into this party out of a fascination more than anything else. I think that's accurate, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
A lot of the things
curiosity.
he did before that was more out of a desperate need to get things off of his mind. He didn't know what he was getting into. Here, he thought he was going... What do you think he thought he was getting into?
I feel like he kind of knew he might have had an opportunity because Nick did tell him that there were some beautiful women there.
I think so, too. I think that was definitely part of it.
The most beautiful women.
It's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly. He seems like a man, like you said, like Andrew Tate. Like he seems like a man who's attracted more to status-related opportunities.
Yes.
You know, he chases status. He wants to be seen a certain way more than he wants to actually do anything in particular.
Yeah.
It's like, why was he at that party at first? In the second scene? I think a big reason was to be seen at that party.
Yeah.
That's a big factor. It's like, why do people go to certain sporting events? Why do they buy ringside tickets to Ali Frazier? To be seen at the event. Whether or not they actually care about the event is almost incidental. You have people that went to Ali Frazier that can't even spell boxing. They've never even seen a fight before. But why is Woody Allen there? Why is Frank Sinatra there? Why is Frank Lucas there? To be seen there, to have the status of knowing you have a ringside ticket to this fight.
Yeah.
And let's flip the script a little bit, too. Let's flip that question around on its head a little bit. Now, I've gone back and forth on this. I know where I stand now. But let me ask you guys, okay? Secretly, in an around-the-corner kind of way, was he supposed to be at that party? Maybe yes. Maybe that unintentional invite was actually an intentional invite that was orchestrated. What do you think?
It's possible. It's plausible. But I wouldn't say it's likely.
I don't think so either.
Me too.
I don't think so.
Considering how they treated Nick after they found out that he fucked up and told him about that.
Yeah.
Even Ziegler at the end didn't even blame Bill, particularly Tom Cruise's character. He said, you know what? If Nick didn't even tell you about this, you wouldn't have went there. And he's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, did Bill press Nick? He did. Did he exacerbate the issue? He did.
Right. So, let's talk a little bit about what he saw at this party, man. What did he see?
Well, he walks up to the front gate, and they have a car bring him up, which is a bit unusual because everyone else there arrived in limos, and he arrived in a taxi cab, which was the first red flag you can tell to the men at the front gate.
He also arrived, oddly enough, without the mask on the whole time. He
Yes.
came in without the mask.
Yep.
Yes.
I thought that was weird. The first time I saw it, I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
It was very weird.
Why would you want to show up to a party like that with your identity out in the opening, right from the beginning? I think that is another classification of his character. Like I said before, he's a man of status. The reason he rose up to be the type of doctor that he is, and the reason why maybe even the reason why he would allow his wife to flirt so much with other men without worrying is because he wants them to know that that's his wife.
Yeah.
That's my wife. They love my wife. I have high status to have a wife like that. You know what I mean? So maybe he wants them to know who he is, even though he knows he might be, breaking the ethics of that party or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning scene, too, she is drinking, down in multiple glasses, and she knows no one there. She's like, why do we always have to show up to these things?
Yeah.
He's clearly networking, and yet
Yeah.
she's kind of later perfectly, makes sense that she feels like an object, perhaps, but by him. She's almost trapped in this lifestyle, and if only she chose differently.
That to her, she feels almost like a prize that he won by being a great doctor.
Yeah.
As opposed to actually like an actual loving partner. That to her, that's just his prize that he gets for being a doctor. As opposed to someone that...
wife.
Yeah, a trophy wife.
Yeah.
As opposed to someone that he actually loves.
So he has two types of interactions with people at this party, okay? You got the silence, the nonverbal communication going on, He sees what he sees, but then, a couple of people pull him to the side and warn him and talk to him in a forbidden way, clearly, Let's talk about that real quick.
The first people that come up
So
to
who
him?
are these people?
Well,
If
I had to say, they'd kill me.
they're people like Bill Clinton
Yeah.
or Jeffrey Epstein
Prince Andrew.
or Prince Andrew.
Andrew, yep.
Or Ziegler.
Or Ziegler. They're people that are either multimillionaires that have status or people that are a part of the political apparatus. They're people that are above that of a doctor.
Now, if you were to walk into a big mansion and there's maybe hundreds of people, who knows? Most of them are naked. Everybody's masked. Okay? And they're all having sex. That's just an orgy. This was more than that. Why? Because you have the red cloak.
You have a ceremony going on.
You have ceremonies.
Yep.
You have
There's
chanting.
A clear code of ethics that cannot, under any circumstances, be violated. You can tell
There's
the
a Greek-
serious nature of what's going on, even without knowing the consequences that did happen after that party. Even without knowing that, you understand, by the way things are happening in these scenes, that this is sacred. You may not go outside of the norms here, except for the ways that are clearly made acceptable.
There's a Greek Orthodox Latin Mass being performed backwards as well. With
Yes.
Sage, the guy in the red cloak, that's like the center point, just chanting with this sage, doing the Latin Mass backwards. And that's a key tenet. We don't know who the cult is, but a common practice of doing all Christian things backwards, it would be satanic in nature, Luciferian. We don't know, but it certainly lends itself to that.
So would you guys say, going outside of the context of the movie, if you just look at cults in general, what is the hierarchy of a cult? You have something. This is a religion. You could say it was a cult. We'll call it a religion. Okay, you got
Well, the difference is
Scientology.
size.
You have something like Scientology,
No, they'll sue us.
where there's multiple layers There's multiple layers of hierarchy, okay? You have different levels that you can ascend to. But then you have something that's very, very, binary. You have one leader and just followers, and that's the whole construct, okay? If you look at the Eyes Wide Shut party, this orgy, this whatever that you want to call this, okay? You have the elites who are the attendees of the party, but you have the women who are, as we find out later, like prostitutes and people that you wouldn't really consider high up in a chain of hierarchy. However, I do think that the women, based on the way they're part of this ritual process, it does seem like the way that the cult is designed, it actually does hold the women to a certain esteem above what they would be outside of this.
Quite possibly, but
even though they're being objects.
All the women at that cult that were being prostituted, they all fit into a very European standard of beauty.
Okay.
Yeah.
They all do.
Yeah.
They do.
Nobody there did not fit that standard.
It was filmed in London too. So.
It was filmed in London, but still, there is people of all races in London.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
There's extras of all races in London. Nobody at that party that was a female had dark skin or curly hair.
Yeah.
It was all a European standard of beauty, which is something very important to note in terms of like what the elites want.
Right.
You know?
This might be a good time to mention that there was a novella that what is it called? Something The Dream. There's a novella
Yes.
that the whole film was basically derived off of a novella, and the novella in that it was based off of had a lot of, I didn't read it, but supposedly it had a lot of religious context that for its time, for the people who wrote the novella or the person who wrote the novella, it had a lot of religious tones, undertones, a lot of cultural reference that you wouldn't quite understand without having read it at the time and place that novella was written. And what Kubrick did was he kind of modernized it so that, all of that religious context was kind of taken out of it. So I wonder with the design of the masks and the set design and sort of the elements of that, how much of that just comes from the stuff that Kubrick didn't bother to remove? Or how much of that was intentionally left in because it was trying to make a comment about what kind of a cult this was?
Definitely intentionally left in, but the difference between a cult and a religion is simply a matter of size. If a cult gets big enough, it's a religion. Christianity, go back to 60 AD, ancient Rome. What is Christianity? It's an illegal cult.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Go to 2022, it's a religion.
Yeah. Another reason why I think that the women are held to a certain, I feel like one of the things that holds a construct like this together, like an elite Eyes Wide Shut party, the reason why these women would even participate in something like this is because, think about it like this. You have prostitutes on the streets of New York. They are the first target for murders. Serial
Always.
killers target prostitutes, okay?
Don't forget trafficking.
There's a lot of abuse involved. A lot of women who get abused end up in these situations. So I think part of the reason why you would have women, off the streets of New York join a thing like this is, one, it's the esteem of, I'm doing sex work anyway, but now I'm doing sex work for the elites. It props them up in a certain sense. So I think there's some commentary here because the woman who absolves Bill of his,
Redeems him.
He redeems him. That's the word. Right, exactly. The woman who redeems Bill, she gets sacrificed. The fact that she even has the ability to do that shows that she has power in the organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Her voice matters.
Outside of that, did she have any power in her life?
No.
Do you know what I'm saying?
But
Yeah.
here's the question, though. It's like you have a situation where you have a woman, right? Where she's being prostituted. How do a lot of pimps control their prostitutes? With drugs.
True.
They turn them into
And
drug
what does
addicts.
Ziegler do in that party?
I mean,
Did Ziegler drug that woman, or did that woman have a genuine overdose? I think leaning towards Ziegler intentionally drugged that woman.
I wouldn't say he intentionally drugged her, but I'd say him and the cult, I think, definitely got them involved with drugs. Where it's like you don't have to drug them, but if you can just make someone an addict, then you have a squeeze. You can always control them with that addiction.
Squeeze.
You always can. I mean, If someone has a serious addiction, the one way you can always control them is by leveraging that addiction against them.
Get
More
them on
control.
coke.
No, that's fair.
And what was she on? She was on Speedball, which is a mixture of heroin and cocaine.
Yep.
If you have someone that's addicted to heroin and cocaine, then what happens if they don't keep taking the heroin and cocaine? They have withdrawals. They get very, very sick, violently sick. I mean, I've seen it firsthand. Someone go through withdrawals. It's one of the most horrific things you can possibly see. It's like someone having the flu times 10. Where, think about that. Cut them off from their supply? Well, here's a reason why. Why do they do what they do? Because you control the drug supply. Without those drugs, they would essentially have no power in the situation or over themselves. In fact, once you do drugs for like an actual long enough time, there's an old saying, once an addict, always an addict. That even if you stop doing heroin, they still view themselves as addicts. They never break that construct of who they are. Think about that.
So in a way, they've kind of taken their bodily autonomy.
Yes.
By giving them this drug they need to survive on.
Yeah, well, think of the writer William H. Burroughs. He wrote Naked Lunch. Now, he became sober after years and years of doing heroin, but even 20 years after quitting heroin, he still identifies as an addict. Could you imagine that? Your identity is set from actions you took over 20 years ago, but you still identify yourself as an addict?
Yeah, I've heard with AA and stuff like that's mainly a mechanism for them, so they don't forget, which is,
To protect themselves, yes.
Yeah.
But even so, your identity is still fixed as an addict. Where many people, when they become sober through sobriety, through AA, oftentimes people just replace one addiction with another. So now, okay, they're not drinking, not doing drugs anymore. What's their new addiction?
Using religion.
Yeah, using religion. Or doing lots of meetup groups where it's like, now their new addiction is what? Going to church, going to meetup groups, meeting new people. That's their new addiction. That's how they live their life. Many people, many addicts, they just trade one drug for another. We've seen, I've seen it firsthand. I've seen people go from heroin to methadone.
Yeah.
Like, what did you do?
Suboxone.
Yeah, you traded one addiction for another. So you're still an addict, whether you want to admit it or not.
Maybe the biggest comment you could make about Bill's character is the fact that Bill was this close. Bill was shut out by the elites, but he was this close to being one of them. He could have been one of them.
That ties me back to the other statement that I said, where are men only as faithful as their opportunities? Mm-hmm. You just said it yourself. He was this close to being one of them. If he was accepted in that community and they said, okay, you know what? Just from your audacity, just because you had the audacity to show up here, lie, get a mask at 1 o'clock in the morning and come, you know what? Just for that.
You know what, guys? That's like when that's like when Bert Kreischer got in with calling himself the Machine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he was just they were robbing the train. I don't know if you guys know the Machine story.
I do, yes.
Yeah, it's like they were kind of just like, we're gonna cast this guy aside. Come on, what a waste of potential.
Yeah,
he's the Machine, guys.
The Machine.
Yeah.
It's just like, I am the Doctor. You know what I'm saying? I am Bill.
Yeah.
Is it possible they didn't accept him because in the end of the movie, we know as much as he was tempted, it is up in the air whether he was very close. But like, would he have actually cheated on it?
Now?
Does he share their occult's values?
Well, this is the thing. They kind of want him to stay away after that. It's not this woman, she took your sins. You know, we sacrificed her so that you didn't have to die.
Yeah.
Presumably, they would have killed him if she didn't.
Yep.
But it's not like he investigates afterwards, and it's not like they want him there. You know what I mean? So it's almost like he lost his welcome. But at the same time, I kind of feel like if he had done things differently, he could have been reaccepted there. Like, he could have actually been allowed to stay. Because they're not going out of their way to kill him. They could if they wanted to.
If he had known the second password.
There was no second password.
If he had known that, then would they have had a way to actually know that he wasn't supposed to be there?
I think they for sure knew.
Would've. There was that one woman that was talking to him, and she asked like if he liked what he saw, and he's like, "I had an interesting look around. I feel like that right there was a tell on his part.
Definitely was a tell.
Like he didn't know what he was going to see when he got there.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? If you showed up there already knowing, if you were like, oh yeah, this is what I expected to see when I got here, you wouldn't have answered that way.
Yeah, no
You
way.
definitely wouldn't have answered
You wouldn't
that
have
way.
been like, oh, I had an interesting look around. Like, well, obviously, fucking, why would you be here otherwise? You know what I mean?
You just pointed out.
Yeah.
By giving that answer, he outed himself.
Exactly.
Maybe even more so than bringing a taxi.
Yep.
Which is a pretty big red
It's a
flag.
pretty
I mean,
big red
if
flag.
everyone else is like arriving in like multi-million-dollar limos that might even be bulletproof and like fit for like a Secret Service member, like fit like for the president, and then you show up in a taxi, that's a pretty big red fucking flag. Not gonna fucking lie.
And it is worth noting too that Nick Nightingale does say that it's at a different location every time.
Every time.
But maybe they just tell him that because he does show up blindfolded.
That is true.
You know, he doesn't even know that necessarily.
Oh, what it is when like you're that powerful and like that elite, you have many locations to be able to constantly change and cycle between.
All right, so before we conclude this scene, I do want to ask you guys, who is Red Cloak? Do you have an opinion on that? Do you think Red
You
Cloak?
have an opinion on that?
On Red Cloak?
I know
Yes.
what I think.
Well, it's revealed in a newspaper clipping that he's Leon Vitali, and it's like painted as the fashion designer. And again, it says he's English, and he's the only person that has an English accent during that whole party.
Here's the interesting thing about that
So we can
name.
infer that. Yeah.
That's a real person. Did you know that?
Well, yeah, the actor.
Yes.
Yes.
That's not insignificant. I think that feeds into the conspiracies a little bit. I won't lie.
Really?
The idea that one of Kubrick's closest, I don't know if you would say friends, but one of the people that worked closely with him,
Acquaintances.
okay, that he would cast him as Red Cloak. What does that say? Is that his in? Is that his way of saying this is how I'm connected
Yeah.
with these guys? This is how this. He's tying it to reality in a little bit of a way. That's just a conspiracy, though. We don't really know that. But anyways, moving on. We have what's the sequence after our seance scene here?
For our seance and orgy scene. Then we decide to head back to where? Right? Where does he go? Like back to his house?
Yeah.
Well, first back to the costume shop to drop off his costume. Then he realized he forgot the mask.
Yeah, and we have that much less awkward exchange, but it's awkward in a different way. He goes to investigate. We have a series of scenes where he basically goes to investigate what the hell just happened.
Yeah.
Like, did the woman that redeemed him, like, did he die?
Did she die?
Yeah.
He goes to the morgue and then he finds the body of the woman that he saved from ODing in the second party scene. He finds her there. And how does he get into it?
And he's a doctor.
Yeah.
And how does he get in there? He says, I'm a doctor.
I'm a doctor.
That's how he gets into the morgue that no one else would have been let into by saying, I'm a doctor. By flashing his medical badge.
Yeah.
Do you think that's realistic?
I think in 1999 it might have been more realistic.
Definitely less now. I would assume.
Especially for who he was as a doctor. 'Cause
In
he
New
was a
York- at least
doctor
in New
to some
York.
Rich, powerful people.
I think
Yeah.
people have less trust in doctors nowadays, especially in the post-COVID world. They've been led to and they've been misled and lied to so many times by doctors.
Yeah.
I think Fauci was a big part of that, where now
Huge part of that.
they have less faith in doctors.
Yeah. So we get to the final scene. As we head to the final scene, we're slowly building up to this sort of sensation that there's a lot more people in on this than we thought.
He's being followed.
He gets
Yep,
followed.
he is.
Yeah, that's a whole thing. And the interesting thing is if you have a cult thing going on and somebody's following you, who sent that guy? Was it one of the women?
It was
at the
Ziegler.
cult? It was Ziegler.
Yep.
That leads me to think that Ziegler might have been Redcoat, or at the very least, he might have been high up there. Maybe he's the founder of the cult. Who
He definitely
knows?
wasn't the redcoat, like different accent, but he definitely was a high-ranking member there.
Yeah.
high ranking.
I
Esteemed.
feel like he might have been when those two people that we see in the mask, they're kind of like staring at him.
Yes.
I think he
It
might
could have been him, yeah.
The one with the trifold
Yeah.
hat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could
But if
be.
you think about it, Ziegler, being the host of that party, you're led to believe he probably, I don't know if he owns the building or if he rented the building, but he might be the location guy. You
Yeah.
know, that's
Yeah.
kind of the sense I get. Like, they need him so that
Yeah.
they have places to bring these people. You know what I mean?
He's
If he can
definitely
host a
out there.
party like that at a big mansion, he might be their ticket. Ziegler's position in this cult, he might be like, okay, where are we going to do the next one?
Yeah.
We got to get Ziegler. He's our location scout. You know what I mean? He might be a part of the word of secrecy. You know what I mean? Making sure. I mean, if he's responsible for this guy following Bill around, You know, he probably clearly has certain responsibilities. However, the way they talk in that room, you could tell he's not top dog number one.
Yeah.
You know, because he, the way he talks about it, he doesn't really have a choice, you know? But that also might be based on the nature of the cult.
Where what he said was, if you knew the names of the people there,
Yeah.
you wouldn't sleep so well at night. That implies that the names there are big, powerful names.
Yeah.
They're well-to-do people with notoriety. So where he's not the most famous person there, he's not the most elite person there. To them, he might be just a fly on the wall. Or rather, someone who's like in mid-level management, not the head of the cult.
Were you guys were you guys surprised at all at the amount of information he was willing to just openly discuss?
At that point, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised because at that point, he's seen behind the velvet curtain. He's seen what happens.
I was a little bit.
And Nick is scared out of his wits. He knows that he can manipulate him that way, even though he likes him as a person. He's not worried about telling him.
But he seemed angrier at Nick than he was at Bill.
Yeah.
Where Nick, he even says, like, you know, Nick had a black eye. And he's like, well, you know what?
It's a lot better than what he should have gotten.
It's a lot better than what he should have got.
Yeah.
You know?
And he is not the top ranking because he was like, he wanted to impress them with Nick Nightingale's piano music. Like, he probably is, like you said, Nick, the party coordinator. Like, he's somewhere in it, maintaining secrecy, maybe picking the place.
Like that one receptionist at the hotel said, well, Nick Nightingale tried to pass him like a note or like an envelope, and the big guys escorting him out wouldn't let them do it. Almost as if on that envelope was going to say, call 911, help me.
Yeah, I love that guy. And he also just laughs that he would know nothing about big guys like that. Like, just literal men in black types. Like just thugs. And it's almost like he was there at that party. And it's weird. A lot of this movie is just facial recognition. Like, all of these people, their facial expressions tell a whole story. Like, this guy looks like he saw Nick that last night at the party. Like, that night, the next morning. It's wild. But
so how do you think so many people could recognize Bill? I know we talked about him showing up in a taxi. He originally walked in without the mask on. But where was Ziegler in all of this? Was he at the front door? I don't know.
Even without the taxi, they can just tell by his demeanor. You can tell by how he's walking around.
Maybe
there's a certain way people walk where they know exactly where they're going versus someone's walking around and they're lost.
Yep.
There was one time back when I was younger where I was lost in Gordon Heights, and I always made sure to always walk as if you know exactly where you're going. Never stop and look around as if like you're misplaced or lost. Then you look fucking vulnerable. Always look like you know exactly where it is you're going, even if you don't. Just fake it. Act like you do.
You know what's also interesting about this film, looking at the whole thing now? Think about this. Bill's character. All right, Bill's not a perfect guy. He almost falls into temptation multiple times. He doesn't handle stress right, and he comes unprepared to a sex orgy. A lot of negatives, a lot of cons there. At the end of the day, everybody in this film seems to like Bill. They all like him. Not
even Ziegler.
Even Ziegler. Even when he creates, Now, what does it say? What does it say about all these characters that so many people went out of their way to protect Bill? What does that say? Is it a fact of his innocence? Is it because he didn't know what he was getting himself into? Would you really sacrifice your life for this man that you met once?
If he saved your life, quite possibly. Especially if you thought your life wasn't valuable anymore. If you thought your life was just going to be that of someone's basically sex toy and just be a drug addict, when this guy might actually have a decent life and a decent family, they just fucked up one time, you might sacrifice your life, especially if you knew like this guy saved your life one time.
I want to point something else out too, which might be a very minor detail, but throughout the whole film, we see some shots of what's her name? It starts with an H. The daughter, Helena. Yeah, Helena is a part of this movie, but she seems like she's only brought up as a tool to tell the narrative. She's not really there as a very... The
character is never fully expanded upon.
So
you don't learn about the character.
What is the point of them having a daughter in this movie? Is it just to show something.
how committed they are in their marriage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's to show that there's a history there and there's something to protect, right? Because if they were married without a daughter, I feel like almost it takes away from the significance of what's going on.
It does, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then
Especially
someone
when they say
else.
that there's dire consequences for him and his family.
Yeah.
I think him having a daughter really, makes him think about some of the things that he might say or not say.
And I think another interesting thing too is there's a statement about the expectations of society, that they would go through such lengths to keep this organization secret. Because you have a lot of cults who just do this shit out in the open. You know what I mean? They'll admit, oh yeah, we do this. But I think it's the high profile of the people there that didn't want to be seen doing this type of stuff, But it's interesting because right in the beginning you see Ziegler basically saying, hey, you know what? This is just between us. But he trusted Bill. He trusted Bill. Is it because of his power or his status? Why did he trust Bill?
In one of the first scenes, he says that. He says, "It's just between you and us." When you have to win from ODing, which ties back into the final scene where Bill goes home. He finds his wife in bed sleeping, laughing, presumably having a dream about the exact same sex cult Bill was just at. Where she said she had a dream about literally having sex with multiple guys in some crazy sex cult. With the mask from the actual sex cult right on the bed that he couldn't find.
Yeah.
Which, how did it get there? Almost as if someone placed it there.
Yeah.
As if like one of the cult members snuck in, put it on his bed, just so you know that they know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost like in Godfather, where the guy wakes up with the horse in his bed.
Yes.
It's like they just did that to you, that way you know that they can fucking touch you.
Yep.
Yep.
Very disturbing scene. Then they talk for a while, and they both get into like their fucking sexual fantasies, and they both admit that, what do they say? That one terrible night, one crazy dream,
Yeah.
can't undo a whole marriage.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So the film, at the end of the day, is about the strength of the bonds of marriage and how nothing can break two people apart. That's ultimately the main moral of the story, right? So at the end of the day, what is the moral of the story? No, it's not about the nature of temptation and lust. It's not about the unresolvable nature of our differences in what we want and our temptations. No. It's about the bonds of marriage. That's what it's all about.
Where the final scene ends, where it's him, his wife Alice, and Helena go Christmas shopping.
Yep.
That's how it ends. And they're having a very casual conversation while at the same time serious in that department store while their kid is running around trying to find new toys.
Yeah, by the way, it makes no sense that they're Christmas shopping. Because in a few scenes before that, during the movie, there's talking, I think this was early in the first half of the movie, him and Alice are like, oh, what do you think about wrapping the presents tonight? And Bill is like, let's just wait until tomorrow.
Yeah.
So they already have presents that they need to wrap.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird that they would end on more shopping.
Well, he's a doctor.
He is a doctor.
Some
that's
people,
true.
some people, it's like
No.
taking their kids, Christmas shopping to pick out their own gifts. Sometimes.
He's not just a doctor. He's a doctor.
He's the doctor.
He's the doctor.
The Doctor Who.
All right.
And they're talking in that department store, and the final thing that she says to him is, well, she didn't want to commit to him forever. She even says that. She's like, I can't do forever, but we can do for a long time.
Maybe until Helena grows up.
And then the final thing she says is, oh, we need to fuck. Almost as if that because they both had sexual fantasies about other people, that to fully consummate the relationship, they almost need to copulate and have sex.
Yep.
As like the actual final way to really just solidify their bond together. Which kind of ties back to Kubrick, where it's like, it shows you how sexual people are, that after that whole experience talking, the way they actually need to bookend it is to have sex.
Yeah.
Which kind of
In a
ends how it
ritual.
begins and begins how it ends. Which the first scene we see is what? Nicole Kidman undressing.
Exactly.
The final scene is what? Nicole Kidman saying, we need to fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that note, we can probably end it.